Welcome into the Knoxville Ice Bears Podcast presented by Wings, etc. My name is Joel Silverberg. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out the Knoxville Ice Bears Podcast. Whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, listening on Apple Podcasts, thank you so much for checking out the show. We've got a lot to cover as we look back on the previous weekend and move up ahead. And now we're getting into the thick of it. Knoxville has its first 2 home game weekend of the regular season up to this point, and they're playing against the Pensacola Ice Flyers for the first time this year. These two teams only saw each other twice. All of last year, those were both down in Pensacola, so the Ice Flyers are making their first trip to the Knoxville Civic Coliseum since the 23-24 season. I believe the most recent trip came in February of that year, so it's been like a year and a half since Pensacola has been here. We're going to talk to Erik Bremer, the voice of the Pensacola Ice Flyers. He's gotten to see this team in action couple of times during their first few home games. And so he's going to give us a breakdown of what it's been like with the transition. Gary Graham fired last season, Rod Aldoff coming in, taking over as the interim, and then Jeremy Gates coming in and being a new head coach for that organization. They're off to a 4-1 start. They are looking solid so far as they get ready for what's to come for the rest of this upcoming weekend. And so excited to talk to Erik about that as we break down the matchup between Knoxville and Pensacola. But Knoxville coming off a successful weekend as we look back on Friday and Saturday. So the Ice Bears defeat Roanoke in a traditional classic goaltenders duel between Steven Mundinger and Austin Rodebush. And I thought both goalies were playing lights out. I thought there were grade A chances on both sides. I thought it was a relatively clean hockey game. We had 2 fights at the same time halfway through the second period. Outside of that, I thought this was a clean hockey game. Didn't see a ton of unnecessary stuff after the whistle either way. And both goaltenders, you see this glove save by Austin Rodebush with Andrew Karapov right in front. You see this opportunity here with Knoxville shorthanded. Jimmy Soper takes the puck away. Great saucer pass. Williams with the one-timer. A sliding glove save by Rodebush. Then another point-blank try. Rodebush kicks the puck away, is able to cover it. We just saw this throughout the second and third periods of both goalies. Then right here, this redirect tap in. A really nice job by Trey Fetchko to get his stick on the puck. And then less than 20 seconds later, we go the other way, and there's Carson Vance getting stopped from the slot on a breakaway. And it takes a defensive zone turnover. Knoxville really strong on the forecheck. That's been a key theme for this team so far through 5 games, is what this team has been able to do from a forechecking standpoint. And it leads to the only, even strength goal, non-empty net goal in this game. As you see, Tyler Williams closes it out with the empty netter. But going right here, Andrew Karapov knocks the puck free away from Travis Broman. Jimmy Soper takes it in through the right circle. He's got Rodebush locked in on him, and he's able to slip the no-look pass out to the slot for Tyler Williams. And so I thought this was just a really good effort by Knoxville from being able to keep that intensity for 60 minutes. I thought Roanoke had their own chances, especially the latter half of the first period. It really looked like Roanoke was starting to take over the game, and Knoxville was kind of hanging on there. And we saw that when they played the previous Saturday back at the Berglund Center, where, okay, Knoxville's really just trying to get out of here with a scoreless first period. And then Roanoke ends up scoring in the final minute. Now, Knoxville came back and won that game. But the point being is Knoxville was able to maintain the intensity. They were able to limit a lot of grade A's as well, even though both teams had their chances. And it ultimately comes down to, and Cooper Smith, my broadcast partner, said it the best. He said, it's going to come down to an odd deflection, a bad bounce. It's just going to come to something wonky that's not going to be on the goaltenders that's going to lead to a goal being scored. And sure enough, it's the forecheck. It's, a player making a play and taking the puck away in the attacking zone, and it leads to one of the better scoring chances that Knoxville had all night. And Tyler Williams gets the goal, and then he adds the empty netter for the insurance marker, and that's all she wrote. And so I think for Austin Rodebush, kind of looking at his first 2 starts, obviously, played in Fayetteville after that, but looking at his first 2 starts, the opener against Huntsville and then the game on Halloween against Knoxville, his first 2 games, he gives up 5 goals in 2 games. 3 of them were off defensive zone takeaways. So you kind of look at the numbers and you think, okay, so Rodebush takes a couple of losses his first 2 starts, but it's not entirely on him. And I think if you're Roanoke, the way that they're playing right now, there's still a lot of intensity. 2 really competitive games in Fayetteville after that game against Knoxville. So they play a 3-3 for the first time this season. All 3 games were winnable. So you can look at Roanoke's record and say, okay, well, it's not exactly where, everybody wants to be undefeated 5-6 games into the season, but I think you're looking at it and thinking, Roanoke's going to be fine long term. I wouldn't be worried about Roanoke from a record standpoint. I think they're going to be able to get it going because they're continuing to generate chances. They've got young talent that I think is going to continue to improve. And then for Knoxville, you've got a lot of cores coming back. And we kind of talked about this on the broadcast on Halloween. Last year, it was a theme for Knoxville of how many rookies they had. They had a couple of returners from the 23-24 squad, but going into the playoffs, 11 out of 20 guys were rookies. And this year, they've got 5 rookies, I think, on the team. Ryan Kuzmich is technically a rookie. Nathan Carl, who's no longer with the team, is a rookie. Hunter Verostek started the season with the team after playing about 6 games last year, so was one of the younger players, but no longer with the team. But Andrew Karapov, Ryan Kuzmich, Nathan Carl, Tyreek Oughton, who is currently on the IR, and Nick Caffarelli, who just made his debut for the team this past weekend. So, you're really only talking about 5 rookies and only like 4 that are actually available for you. So, there are actually 3 that are on your team. So it's just interesting to kind of see how this team has matured and grown. They've got more experience. You're seeing some of the second-year players get better. Tyler Williams is off to a really good start. He had a huge weekend. You're watching Eric Olson make plays defensively. He's been solid in the faceoff circle. He's gotten a couple of assists already. Noah Finstrom's flying around, generating scoring chances. I think there's a lot to like about what Knoxville is doing on both sides of the puck. Needs to hit the net a little bit more. That's something that we've talked about. It was a big theme in the Friday-Saturday games, and eventually they got it going with, especially with Saturday, they really got it going, hit some really nice shots. But there were some opportunities that missed the net entirely in both those games. And as Knoxville continues to improve, hopefully that comes with it, because I thought Knoxville has done a great job at really rebounding after, you lose a close one in Fayetteville to start the season. Okay, Colby Muse, reigning goaltender of the year. You lose a 2-1 game. The game-winning goal scored off a defensive zone draw, bad bounce. It happens. Hey, let's move forward. Then the home opener, you lose 5-0. It's like, okay, so we've got to get the offense going. 1 goal in 2 games. And now Knoxville has hit the 4-goal mark twice. They beat Roanoke in a goaltender's duel 2-0. You've got Steven Mundinger that stopped 70 out of 72 shots in 2 games to bounce back from the 5 goals against in his first home start of the year. Then he has to come in when he's cold for the game on October 25th in Roanoke. Gives up 2 goals in about 13 minutes. Obviously, and from a number standpoint, that's just an unfortunate spot because even though he played well and made some big saves, because of the 2 goals in such a short amount of time, comparatively from the entire game standpoint, it goes into the average compared to only those 12 minutes. So, his numbers take a hit, which isn't really fair to Steven. It's also just really unfortunate for Tyreek because he doesn't get to finish his pro debut. And I know we talked about that on the podcast last week, but it just really goes to show that, the numbers don't always tell the whole story. I thought Mundinger was fantastic. I mean, he made some huge saves on Friday. I thought his best saves came on Saturday as Birmingham was threatening to either extend their lead in the second period or tie the game after Knoxville retook the lead in the third. And Knoxville, I thought, down the stretch did a really good job at shutting down the Great A's for Birmingham in that third period, where they tried to make it a little bit easier on Steven Mundinger, had got tested early, made some big saves, and then after Knoxville scores, kind of a bizarre play on the 2 Birmingham goals where there's the misplay behind the Birmingham net, then they throw it up the middle, it leads to a 3-on-2, and Arkip Bledzianko is sitting there on the back doorstep off the cross-ice pass from Philemon. And then Matthew Wood with the breakaway chance right after Knoxville almost scored to take a 2-1 lead. And so instead, Birmingham's got the advantage, but Knoxville does a really good job. Jarrett Cupp reads this play in the neutral zone, makes the effort to poke it ahead to Tyler Williams, and just finishes the play over the glove side of Hayden Stewart. And Mundinger, this sliding save is unreal. And Arkip Bledzianko, look at his reaction. He knows it. He has an open net. And Mundinger doesn't even get it with the glove. I think he gets it with his forearm up by the elbow and knocks it over the crossbar. Good puck movement here for Knoxville on this goal. Jason Branshaw sneaks into the slot, gets his stick on it, puts it over the blocker side of Stewart, and suddenly Knoxville's got the lead and they don't look back. And this is a really nice turnaround. John Gurskus talked about it in the pregame interview before Saturday's game, how Knoxville was going to have to come out and match Birmingham's intensity, a team that hadn't won going into that game. And so you got a desperate hockey team playing at home, and Knoxville finds a way to bounce back from a second period deficit. They score 4 unanswered goals. They win the game 5-2. And so I think, there are some things that you have to like. Obviously, Gurskus is going to focus on development and wanting to help these guys improve. But the way that Knoxville responded, I know that, it's one thing to say, okay, you're talking about the one team that doesn't have a win yet in the SPHL. Look, every team in this league is tough. And looking at Birmingham, I don't see a blatantly obvious last place team. Do they have deficiencies that are a little bit more obvious than they were a year ago? Yes, but think about the talent that Birmingham is having to replace. Ryan Romeo's not there. Kyler Matthews isn't there. Trevor Thurston isn't there. Taylor Brierly's not there. Those are 4 really good SPHL caliber defensemen. Some of those guys have played in the ECHL and have had call-ups before. Those 4 guys aren't on your roster anymore. So you've got to replace that talent. I think they have to be happy with what Jacob Musatelli has done in net, but there is still the responsibility of having to replace Austin Lotz. Obviously, Hayden Stewart is more than capable of being the ace as Musatelli develops, and those guys have split some reps already. Musatelli has had some really good moments. So long-term, if those are the 2 guys that Birmingham's riding with, I think they can win with those players. But then offensively, no Andrew Ballant, no Drake Glover, no Carson Rose, no Nikita Kozarev. So we're talking a minimum 4 forwards and 4 defensemen and a goalie that you're having to replace from a team that, guys that were a large reason why Birmingham was a cup contender the previous 3 seasons. And every once in a while, you have that one year in this league where you have a massive exodus, whether it's through retirements, guys going overseas, trades, or just, guys testing free agency if they're not protected. And so you have to reload a little bit more than you normally do. That was the case for Knoxville going into last season. Now Knoxville's the team that has all these returning players, plus they've added some other guys that have SPHL experience. Blake Tosto, Troy Button, Jarrett Cupp, and then picking up guys that still have experience from elsewhere. Robin Lilliquist has played several years over in Sweden. Davide Gaeta, a couple of years in Switzerland, and then was the forward of the year in the FPHL last season. So guys that are beyond their amateur career that are still bringing experience, and you're seeing those guys contribute all over the ice. So it just kind of goes to show what a difference a year can make. And so Birmingham might be in a little bit of a rebuilding stage. That doesn't mean it has to be an entire rebuilding season. And so you still see things that you like about Birmingham's team, but obviously it's been all close games that have been competitive going into the third period. Before this week, they lost 4-2 on Thursday night to Pensacola. That was with an empty net goal towards the end of the third period. So essentially a 1-goal game. This was really the one game that kind of got away from Birmingham towards the end. But even with less than 5 minutes to go in the third period, it was still 3-2. So Knoxville has an opportunity earlier in the third with a 5-on-3 power play for about a minute and a half to try to extend the lead. Birmingham kills off the penalty and did it really efficiently. Not a ton of, big saves that Hayden Stewart had to make in order to keep Birmingham in that game. So Birmingham, they fight hard. They kill off the 5-on-3. And then the takeaway by Eric Olson leads to the goal by Gaeta. So, and then from there, you have the empty netter by Tosto, and that's kind of the end of the game. But I think Birmingham kind of understands, it's very different. Just as speaking as somebody who witnessed a last place hockey team 2 years ago, when Knoxville was 0-6 to start the season, they had 1-goal loss. The other 5 were by 3 goals or more, including a couple of 5+ goal losses. Keep that in mind. So they lost to Fayetteville by 3 goals twice, lost to Birmingham by 5 and then by 6, lost to Macon by 5. And that was a Macon team that ended up being in 9th place. So you saw the gap that Knoxville was looking at the start of that 23-24 season. Birmingham's not that in that position. They're not that type of team that's having to climb up the mountain that much. Now, if the wins don't come together, if the close losses keep piling up, there's always a conversation about, okay, well, how does that affect the locker room? Do guys want to try, taking midseason offers overseas and stuff like that? And I haven't talked to anybody in Birmingham about, what's happening behind the scenes. That's all speculation. That's just the sort of stuff that sometimes happens when a team in this league doesn't start out great. I do think Birmingham has some capability. I think they have some tools that they can work with. And maybe this ends up not being a top 3 finish in the standings like it has been for the majority of the last 3 years, but maybe they're able to scrap some wins together and challenge, kind of be in the middle of the pack when we get towards the end of the season. And so, look, somebody's got to miss the playoffs. Somebody's got to come in last. We'll see how the rest of the year plays out. It's still too early to see because we get a lot of repeat matchups this time of year. Before Knoxville played Birmingham, they had only seen 2 different opponents all season. And it's funny because Pensacola is only going to be the 4th different team that Knoxville has seen all year. And about a month from now, Knoxville will be getting ready to face its 8th different opponent when it faces Quad City. And then a week later, they'll play Peoria, and then they'll have seen everybody. So we see a lot of different opponents in November. Knoxville is going to see Pensacola this weekend. They're going to see Evansville in a couple of weeks. They'll see Macon and Huntsville for the first time the week of Thanksgiving. So a lot of different opponents that you'll see through the month of November, both at home and on the road. And so as Knoxville gets ready for Pensacola, team that started 4-1, goaltender's already been named player of the week, and they are a much different looking hockey team than a squad that only won 15 games a season ago. Now they've already got 4 wins in their first 5 games, coming off a really close shootout win over Macon. And so we will talk to Erik Bremer, the voice of the Ice Flyers, when we return. He'll preview the matchup and talk about what it's been like transitioning into a new era with Jeremy Gates as the team's new head coach, and some of the returners that have been contributing offensively, and just how it's been different and how it's been better for the organization, for the team, and for a fan base that has continued to show great support to the organization despite everything that happened last year. So that conversation with Erik Bremer coming up next as he joins the Knoxville Ice Bears podcast presented by Wings, etc. Again, check them out on Lovell Rd, right outside Turkey Creek, right off the interstate in West Knoxville. Good food, great times await you at Wings, etc., proud sponsor of the Knoxville Ice Bears podcast. That conversation with voice of the Ice Flyers, Erik Bremer, he joins us next right here on the Knoxville Ice Bears podcast.
You're listening to the Knoxville Ice Bears podcast, sponsored by Wings, etc. Good food and great times await at Wings, etc.
Continuing on with the Knoxville Ice Bears podcast, presented by Wings, etc. Check them out on Lovell Rd, right outside Turkey Creek in West Knoxville. Very pleased to welcome our next guest as the Ice Bears get ready to take on the Pensacola Ice Flyers for 2 games this weekend. So we welcome to the show Erik Bremer, the voice of the Ice Flyers. Good to have him back again this year. Also the voice of the Pensacola Blue Wahoos. So a lot of ties to East Tennessee, obviously with the Knoxville Smokies moving back. Erik, thanks again for joining the podcast again this season. I got to ask, what do you think of Covenant Health Park now that you've gotten through your first season getting to visit the Smokies' new stadium?
Well, thanks for having me. I did enjoy our many trips to Kodak over the years because I would oftentimes get into the national park and do all the things out in that area. But beautiful downtown ballpark in Knoxville now. The team puts us up in a really nice hotel right next to all the commerce around there. I can walk to and from the ballpark. I can check out the Sun Sphere. It was a really memorable week for us. We had some really good games as well. Our top prospect, Thomas White, struck out 14 guys in 5 innings and kind of made some national news in his start against Knoxville. So that was a trip, aside from the brand new ballpark, that I'll remember for a long time.
Yeah, and you're actually real close to the Knoxville Civic Coliseum. So you're maybe like a 2-minute drive just down that hill to get where the Ice Bears play. And that's where the Ice Bears are going to face the Ice Flyers this upcoming weekend on Friday and Saturday. Really solid start for Pensacola, 4-1. It's tied for the best win percentage right now in the SPHL with Huntsville. What has it been like over the last few months? This team missing the playoffs last year, a head coaching change after Rod Aldoff came in to step in for the interim after Gary Graham was let go, and then Jeremy Gates comes in. What has it just been like with the transition and seeing this season get off to such a good start?
Well, keep in mind, I don't travel with the team, so I've only seen them play their home games, and they've played their best on home ice. So I've got a pretty solid first impression of this year's team. I think, it was just a mentality change to have a new coach turning over a new leaf after a surprisingly disappointing season last year. Ice Flyers organization and their fans are so accustomed to having playoff caliber teams on the ice, and that was not the case in 24-25. So to have a new head coach, to have several new players filling up the roster, to have several fan enhancements to the facility. I think everyone was ready for a new chapter, and thankfully the players have been able to hold up their end of the bargain as well. It's just a really exciting, fresh start, and I think everyone's feeling it right now.
What has it meant to the players that are back this season from last year's team to just see the support from the community? Attendance has been phenomenal at the home game so far. So what has it been like for the organization as a whole, just despite everything that went sideways last season, knowing that the community has still been in place to support the organization?
Yeah, I think that was one of the toughest things for the longtime players who had been in an Ice Flyers sweater for so long. And they know that this community supports them and expects a high standard. The fans kept showing up last year, even though it was not a good year on the ice. So it was a disappointing part of last year that they disappointed their fans. It's been really gratifying for many of the returning players to perform so well in front of their home fans this year. And if you look at, obviously we're just a few games in, but some of the top performers, Lucas Jiricek, Shane Bull, Matt Wiesner, there are a lot of new names on this team, but it's the familiar names who have come up big. And I think that speaks to the value of having some stability from last year's team to this year's team, even though so much has changed.
And one of those newcomers, Rico DiMatteo, the goaltender, has already been named Player of the Week for his outstanding performance. Pensacola's goaltending has been solid, working Ty Taylor in there as well. And so what has it been like just kind of seeing this team be able to have stability on the back end?
Well, that was one of the many things that went wrong for the Ice Flyers last year. There was a constant search to find someone that they could trust between the pipes. And Rico DiMatteo, who, is making his professional debut essentially in an Ice Flyers uniform, to have a good first start and to build up that confidence. Of course, it's a team effort. He felt confident because he had good defense supporting him and he wasn't hung out to dry too much. But, Rico DiMatteo is a young guy who has growth potential, and the fact that he's been able to build a solid foundation in his first couple starts, I think really bodes well for his future.
Moving forward, obviously, there's this kind of early stage. We see often the same matchup. So Pensacola, they've seen Birmingham a couple times. They've seen Macon a couple times. We've seen a couple of shootouts already for Pensacola. So now as we get into a little bit more differentiation moving into November, the matchup against Knoxville, what can Knoxville fans kind of expect to see when Pensacola comes to town this upcoming weekend?
Well, that's a good question. And I try and talk with our head coach, Jeremy Gates, before every one of our broadcasts. I ask him about scouting the opponent. And keep in mind, this is a first-year head coach in the SPHL, a very knowledgeable hockey mind, a former player for the Ice Flyers. But, his answer to my question at this point in the season is, we're just kind of focusing on our own guys right now. So as we branch out the schedule and see some unfamiliar opponents, I think the Ice Flyers are going to be focused on the Ice Flyers. But in terms of the style of play and things of that nature, Ice Flyers have been playing pretty cleanly, largely penalty free. They also haven't taken advantage of too many power plays. So that'll be the one thing that I do want to see out of Pensacola when the special teams play comes in to play. How do they respond? Because that's been kind of the unanswered question to this point in the season. Ice Flyers have had a couple shootout wins, but that also means that they were unable to score a goal in 3-on-3 overtime as well. So 5-on-5, we've seen a lot of that. But the big question right now is how are they going to perform on the power play? They've done pretty well in the penalty kill, but that's something that this Ice Flyers team, as they gel and, become more of a unit, that'll be something that they're going to have to figure out.
Hey, focusing on yourselves. That's the approach that worked for John Wooden. Won a lot of national championships at UCLA. We'll see how that goes for Jeremy Gates. And obviously focusing on the upcoming matchups this weekend. He's Erik Bremer. He's the voice of the Ice Flyers. You can hear him when the Ice Flyers are playing at the Pensacola Bay Center. We'll have the call for you at the Knoxville Civic Coliseum this Friday and Saturday at 7:30. Erik, really great to have you back on. Thank you so much again for the time. Enjoy the rest of hockey season. We will see you when the Ice Bears eventually make the return trip back down to Florida.
Yeah, we'll see you in February. Looking forward to it.